The RMLD Board of Commissioners recognizes the importance of hearing public comment at the discretion of the chair on items on the agenda. Once recognized, all persons addressing the board shall state their name and address prior to speaking. Is there anybody from the public here?
No.
Okay. And I think we can just get right into it, right?
Yes, sir.
So do we want to take item number 2, Greg?
Yes. Yes.
Who's my office? I don't know. But, as you guys all know, John Stenbeck served as a commissioner from 2012 until this past spring. A couple of months back, upon his announcement, the Board of Commissioners, RMLD, those of us that were here, basically they expressed their thanks. But one of the things we also wanted to do is for retiring commissioners and retirees of RMLD, we have this meter lamp. It has an inscription on it, right? The inscription says, John Stenbeck 2012 to 2023, and that is actually a real residential meter circa about 1920, and it does, when you plug it in, it does illuminate.
Yeah.
I
really cool.
communicated with John last week. He wanted to be here. He misses being part of our team, but he really wants us to make sure we deliver that next week to his home. So, for official, from RMLD's perspective, I'll speak for the Board of Commissioners and the Citizens Advisory Board, myself personally, but we are very thankful to John for the service that he provided to RMLD and the town of Reading and all the customers of RMLD. So, if you guys want anything else, but
the very sought after meter lamp.
Yeah.
Very, very popular. Absolutely. It is a great gift. Very unique.
Really nice.
very good. Back to you, Dave.
We all thank John for his service, wish him well, and thank you for arranging that, Greg. Anybody else have anything they would like to say? If not, we can move on with the agenda. I think I didn't want to rush.
Nope, it's good. You're good.
So I think we realize there's not any member of the public here, so that is there is no public comment to be had. Report from the Citizens Advisory Board. Is there any report from the CAB?
I didn't have anything prepared at this time.
Okay, that's fine. Are there any board liaisons here?
No.
Okay. Then it looks like we can move right along. We have a motion to approve several minutes. Would somebody like to make the motion? How about Pam? Would you like to make this motion so you can learn how motion making is done?
I think that's
Involves reading.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Motion.
Okay.
So move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve the February 6th, 2023, February 15th, 2023, March 15th, 2023, April 19th, 2023, May 29th, 2023, June 7th, 2023, open session meeting minutes as presented on the recommendation of the General Manager and the Board Secretary.
Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any comments or edits on the minutes as presented?
No.
Okay. Then we're ready for a vote. All in favor? Talbot, aye.
Sculptor,
Marlene Abita, aye. Pam Daskalakis, aye.
Okay, we have 4-0 with one absence. Okay, annual report confirmation, Greg. So this is a motion. We want to, so are we reviewing this report or just voting on it, or what's the motion, Greg?
The intention is to vote on it. So the core, so what it is in front of you and what the package is, typical with the way we've been doing annual reports recently. The core meat of it is the audited financials, which we had reviewed back in, I believe it was the June meeting.
Yep.
And so this is basically the front section, which kind of summarizes the year. It provides, some key statistics, particularly in the power supply and particularly in the power supply. Those are all also captured in the annual DPU report that's already been submitted. It talks about the, the art contest that we did, and just kind of sets the stage. So it's you know, it's a brief summary, that first section, but we've already voted on the approval of the financials, which is the core of it, is already done. So this is more the intro. And yes, we'd like to vote on it if we can.
Okay, can you just toggle to the screen that has the characterization of our non-carbon and carbon portfolio?
Absolutely.
Because I know we tweaked this last year in some helpful ways to reflect.
Yeah, we took all those tweaks we did, we just basically updated the data
Right,
and the dates.
right. So maybe just it's worth explaining just for the uninitiated, which may include, you know, most people, what the chart on the upper left is telling us for 2023. And then out beyond that, and why yep, go ahead.
Great. So we've tried to put, you know, both these two charts are very important. The one on the left, like someone left there, which basically the lower left-hand corner is the snapshot for 2022, and then that stack bar chart goes out through 2032. Obviously, our power supply, we have contracts that go out to actually 2051. And that's not, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But in order to be compliant, so this basically links to our policy that we set up 2 years ago relative to how we're handling our certificates. And so certificates for us include RECs, renewable energy credits. It includes EFECs, emission-free energy certificates. But as far as a compliance perspective from the state's view, and our target isn't official for any of the MLPs until 2030, and that's 50% of our power supply.
Yeah.
But the way that it is recognized is you need to retire certificates. In our case, the certificates that we purchase are always purchased. We call them associated with the energy. There is a market where you can actually buy certificates and then retire those certificates. But in our case, the majority of our renewable energy and nuclear has certificates with it. So this chart on the left, basically, that line indicates what we retire.
Yeah.
So this goes, Dave, you're exactly right. So in 2022, you know, the goal was to retire 26% of our energy sales in the form of certificates. And in this particular case, of that 26%, a little over 20% were effects associated with our nuclear power supply, and then the 5.6% were certificates tied to, in this particular case, those were mostly Maine Class 2, but those are all hydro certificates. The other certificates that we had purchased over the course of 2022, we actually sold rather than retired.
Yeah.
In that particular case, so that purple, that's 74%, represents the rest of the power. And, you know, for compliance accuracy, you know, while on the right hand, I'll talk about the right hand side for a moment, but from a compliance perspective, you know, per our policy, you know, we are 26% non-carbon.
Yep. I just want to just point out a couple things about this figure on the left.
Yes, please.
Well, just from a copy editing note, the vertical scale of the percentages. Each of those lines represents 10 percentage points, right?
Yes, sir.
So I would suggest that before you publish this, you get the vertical scale added. And reading so 2022 means reading that 20% of our non-carbon was nuclear, right?
Of the certificates that we retired.
Yeah, but of our portfolio that we can say is non-carbon under the law, 20% is nuclear, and then the blue is hydro, and that's roughly 5%. So it's about 25% non-carbon.
It'll be total 26, but you're right. Yeah, the blue is, the two of them need to be total 26% between the two.
Okay. And then just to continue that, for 2023 and 2024, the entirety of our power supply that we can say is non-carbon is nuclear, because
through 26. That's correct.
Through 2026. Yep. So 2023 through 2026, all of our non-carbon is nuclear, and there's no non-carbon that's wind or solar that we can say is part of our power supply, as opposed to ones that we help facilitate and build. But the actual power that we're consuming that we can claim is non-carbon is all nuclear, and no solar and no wind for the next.
Right, for
Okay.
23 through 26.
Okay.
So in terms of what is compliance eligible, that's exactly correct.
Got it. So, which is the way it is. I mean, when the only way you can say something is non-carbon is if you've retained and retired the certificates. There's no other way to say that you have non-carbon on your portfolio.
Correct. And the key is the retirements, as you mentioned. Yeah, obviously, in order to retire them, you have to buy them, but the compliance obligation is retirement. Exactly.
And obviously, we all know we do actively go and start up various projects, and that's
yeah.
reflected in the thing on the right, but then we sell the RECs to others so that they can claim the non-carbonness of it, but we can't.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. No,
So
you're
just
right.
wanted-
No, that's totally good. And right. I think, so we'll double check it. I think that missing, we'll make sure that 100% on the left is there. It might have been just when it got printed, but we'll make sure that in the final PDF it's there. So thank you for that.
I'll add one question to that. So as we think about the customers who have opted into the renewable choice, is there a portion either on this slide or elsewhere in the presentation that talks about that?
Not in this one.
Or
So we just started up the renewable choice program. It is rounding error right now in terms of the portfolio. So it got lost in it doesn't register yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
future potentially we could have
we'll-
like a portion that is
yeah.
showing.
and just to clarify for everybody, those retirements are above like for 2022, they're above the 26%. And for 2023, whatever the renewable choice is above the 29% that we're about to do.
Right.
And then following up on the discussion that we had 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, in December, we'll go back and kind of make a presentation in terms of recommendations and maybe changing the percentages that we do, at least have a discussion about that. But in all cases, that renewable choice is above, but it's still low in adoption, and it's not a big number relative to the size of the portfolio.
Since we're in the, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, it's a good opportunity. We have this public meeting. We might as well plug the program. Greg, do you want to say for anybody who might be watching, what renewable choice is and what they would do to enroll in it?
Absolutely. Yeah, since it's a public event. So we have a renewable choice program that we offer to all customers, all rate classes, commercial, industrial, as well as residential. It allows them to earmark additional dollars that would be included in their bill above their regular bill that go into a pool, and then on a quarterly basis we retire certificates. In this case, well, currently the way it's structured is class 1 certificates, so primarily Mass class 1s, but Mass class 1s, Rhode Island class 1, Connecticut class 1s, but right now it's primarily, so it's only class 1s, but it could be any one of the states.
Yeah.
The intention there, we have 3, because this year we're going to be at 29%. The 3 tiers are 50%, 75%, and 100%. So we basically, there's a simple spreadsheet on the website. We'll basically allow you to look at all 3 of them and get an estimate of what the incremental cost would be for your bill, depending upon your kilowatt hours. It's tied to your kilowatt hours. Of course, your kilowatt hours vary each month, so it'll vary. So that's on the website. There is a form that you can actually fill out on the website, but of course you can always call customer service or email customer service, and they'll walk you through the process and give you more details behind it. But the intention, and as we just mentioned in our conversation, we as RMLD purchase more certificates, whether EFECs or RECs, and various classes of RECs. So we purchase more than we retire tied to our policy. So basically the parts that we might sell from a ratepayer perspective, the dollars that come in are basically balanced against the retirements, the dollars that we would have received from the certificates that we would have sold on the open market. So for the individuals that want to participate, they can become more green.
Got it.
Yeah, and for industrial customers, we have a couple of industrial customers participate, and so we send them an annual letter that they put into their files. So we always control the certificates, and starting in 2030, we have to by law. But we give them that document, and then if a customer has an interest, we can send an individual report to them, a residential one. So that's how it works. For the
There's
rest
a link.
no,
There's a link at RMLD's website, and is there a special phone number? I mean, just in case there's somebody out there.
no, it's the main phone number.
Okay.
it's the main phone that's on our website, et cetera. It goes in,
And-
and if they happen to call after hours, they'll end up, our phones are staffed 24/7, just, public announcement. Our control room is staffed 24/7. So if customer service is not, customer service window's not open, then it goes to the control room.
Okay.
And that individual knows to send people to the right direction.
Last very, very quick question, ballpark it. Let's say I'm somebody, I have $100 a month electric bill under the normal program here, and I decide I'm gonna enroll in renewable choice and go 100%, that I can say 100% of my power is from non-carbon, and my current bill is 100 a month. Ballpark it for us. What do you think their bill's gonna go up? 120? Go up 20 bucks?
At the most.
So at the
correct.
most, they'll go from 100 to $120 to go from 29% to 100% non-carbon.
Correct.
That's where we're at.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Now, I'm going to admit that, well, I'm not going to admit it because
No, you're gonna sign up.
it's like, it's one of these things where, I'm somebody who talks about, oh, we need more. And then I myself have not signed up for this, which is embarrassing, but I'll say it right here. And so I'm going to go do it. But it just kind of reflects how we are all so busy that, it's easy to not do, let certain things slide. But anyway, that's all.
No, that's great. Thank you.
My own hypocrisy. All right. So there you go.
Did we do the motion?
Yes, we do. We already did it, right? We motioned and seconded it.
No, we didn't motion.
No, we did
Not
motion.
We need a
We
motion.
didn't. Okay. Who wants to move?
I think Pam was great at it the first time.
I can do it
think you-
again.
Did a good job reading.
Thank you. Lots of practice. Move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve the annual report for calendar year 2022 as presented on the recommendation of the general manager.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Talbot, aye.
Sculter, aye.
Marlena Beta, I.
Daskalakis, aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg.
No, teamwork to do that.
What do we got next?
Policy reviews, 2 policies. So I'll walk you through, there's 2. One is the strategic plan, policy 18. The second one is vehicle use, policy 31. The original, so in the package, the original, and again, just so everybody knows, we try and do, there's 31 policies that we have. We try and cycle through all of them over a 3-year period. So we try and do at least 1. Sometimes we're able to do 2. We have 2 for tonight. The strategic plan one, the original version was pretty simple to begin with. We just looked at it and basically streamlined it because it was another one on the list to be taken care of. And the key changes that we made to it, there are a couple of real simple changes we made to it. The first one is, in the original one, it defined what tools we needed to use. It focused on SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, etc. While that is a very good framework and tool, etc., we're a municipal utility, we're a little different structure. So anyways, the recommendation is not to put the tools that we would use or the frameworks in place, but still keep the intention to do a strategic plan. It originally was set up for every 5 years. We given the dynamic nature of it, we talk about this literally every meeting, but you'll see some highlights later, in a few moments. So we kind of walk through the big picture overview of it. The other element that it had in place was it talked about RMLD will develop internal operational plans to implement the strategic plan. We decided to delete that. We kind of think it's obvious that you need to execute on a strategic plan. So we deleted that text. So at the end of the day, it's not significantly different. It's just a little bit more streamlined. So
Okay,
that's,
so can I just ask a question? We're looking here at a memo about the changes, but do we have red lines later on that we can just look like a couple pages ahead?
just,
Okay.
yep. So there you go. So that's on the screen. Yeah. So I think what's worked out well, the team basically puts together the summary, the indicated changes, the original, and then the final, and then this one is the red line.
Okay.
The other thing that we added here that we thought was kind of important, and we'll talk about that in the strategic plan anyways, is we also inserted, you can see in red, mission statement. Vision statement's important. We'll walk through that in a few minutes.
The mission statement is different than the strategic policy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
A mission statement is, right. This basically says that we need to put together a strategic plan every 5 years.
Well, it says strategic plan shall set out a mission statement. The mission statement is different than a strategic plan. It says,
Are you
purpose of
reading
scope.
the pieces here?
Well, Oh, so the red, is the red an ad?
Well, that red's an ad.
That's what I'm saying. A strategic plan is not a mission statement, right? So if you're
Correct.
adding that in, what's the mission statement is completely different. That-
Yeah, so, what is meant to, when you look at the, without the edits, it basically says the strategic plan should include the mission statement and the vision statement. The way we kind of look at it, the mission statement basically, and we went back and did a little bit of research on it because people talk about mission and vision, et cetera, but mission statement basically is who we are and what we do. The vision is where we're going. The strategic plan is how we're going to get there. And then the goals are milestones to make that happen. So those four pieces kind of fit into it. Just having it with vision, we think the mission is important in terms of laying out what a vision plan, what a strategic plan is. You'll see it. It's literally the first slide of the deck we're about to look at is what's the mission and what's the vision. And then the bulk of it is what's the plan behind it. Does that make sense?
No.
You don't like it?
I don't like
We can,
Yeah, that's
we can
right.
leave it.
That's fine. I'll go over it. I just don't.
Okay.
Let's scroll through the red lines. That's a good point, Bob. So let's scroll through the red lines and see what else you're asking us to vote on this tonight, Greg?
Sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, please.
So, maybe there's an argument that we give ourselves one cycle to, read it more carefully and see if we have maybe tweaks we want to make. It is a pretty important
Yeah,
mission policy document.
If the suggestion is that you want to read it and then we vote on it next month, we could do that. That's fine.
That's what I'm feeling like, just from what Bob said, and I also would like more of a chance for us all to look at this, and unless anybody disagrees and feels strongly that we need to vote on this tonight.
Only this
I was
big,
gonna say,
right?
maybe we could do it.
One page, right?
It's half a page.
It's a half a page.
Okay, so you want, okay, all right.
Now, do what Bob and Greg just explained, that the strategic plan shall include and omit set out.
Oh, that's fine. So include, that's a better way to do it. Yeah, sure,
That's
sure.
what you said,
Okay.
right?
That's
And
what I
that
said, yeah.
It should be a mission statement and then say what that is, which you say is who we are and what we do,
Yep.
comma, a vision statement, which is what we plan to do, comma, and a strategic plan defining how we plan to get there. Like you just said all those things,
Yeah.
but they're not in here. So
Sure.
um,
Yeah, we can
that-
insert that sentence
that
in there.
would that break it down more.
So I'm gonna already bring up the draft page edit just to go with it.
Perfect. Yeah, actually, the first slide of the strategic plan, it has the words that I just used, what the mission is, what the vision is, what the strategic plan is, and what the goals are. And we could put it right in that first sentence. And I think you're right. It shouldn't see set out. It should be include.
So are we live editing this now and voting on it, or do we want to, what does the board feel?
I think we should just live edit and vote.
Okay.
It's simple enough.
Okay.
Sorry.
We're gonna switch. Hey, wait, bear with us just a moment, Dave. We're gonna switch screens. Hold on. Oh, perfect.
I hate this strategic plans to be more like engineering driven / and then the
Data.
mission statement is,
Oh, you're gonna see it. Let's.
no, I'm just,
We
that's
took-
why I'm looking at
We
that.
took our mission and vision statement and it was done a while back and there was
Yeah.
a lot of thought that went into it, but we're in a different era.
It changes. That's
And so and
I've
it's
changed
also
things
tight.
too.
Well, and to that point, I know we'll get to the edits on the top section, but the detail that talks about it's going to be updated every 5 years.
Mhm.
And it goes
At
out for
least
2
every 5
decades,
years.
at least every 5 years. Is there an opportunity for us to include something here about just a kind of a pulse check on how are we doing against the strategic plan? I know you took out the comment around developing the operational plans against it, but so we don't want it to go on a shelf for 5 years and then,
Oh, yeah. So where I'm going with the comment, like every meeting is a snapshot and update. And I view that because we're presenting to you, here's the next piece of, here's the next thing that we're doing. Sometimes we need approval, sometimes it's an update. We typically, and we we will put this in place again, and that is, kind of a year in review from the, the here's the general manager's report to the Board of Commissioners on an annual basis, here's what we did. And we want to try and tighten that down. Here's what we did this year to focus on. Here's what we did against the plan. And here's, here's things that weren't part of the plan that we executed. And here's what we did against the budget. We're going to try and put that discipline in place in a tighter fashion, as opposed to a laundry list of, we set 50,000 poles and we moved 4 transformers. Those are all important pieces, but like, how does it drive?
Context of.
Yeah,
the
with
broader-
context behind it. So that's what I think is going to be different.
So perhaps just an additional line after saying that you'll present the results of the comprehensive, 2-decade plan at least every 5 years, and just say, and annually, provide an update on progress against the strategic plan.
I like that. And we provide a progress update.
Yeah.
So can we confirm that's like what we're talking about?
So I would keep it as is, as drafted in the first, and then say, and annually provide a status update
Period.
on the progress against the strategic plan. Sorry, are you on? I'm on the edited one. I'm on the one
Section
with the
2 policy details.
Right after commissioners.
Correct.
Right.
yes.
And annually provide a progress update against
Yes.
the strategic plan. And yeah, there you go.
And
Versus.
you wanted to change set out to include?
Yep, change that too. Absolutely. If you like lessons, we'll go back up and change the include. If we like lessons, okay, good. Let's change to that. So shall include.
And then say, after the words mission statement, say,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. So,
you defined it so succinctly, just who we are and what we do.
yep. So just put in parentheses who we are and what we do. And then you, vision statement. Our direction. Where we are going. Yep. That's better. Strategies,
Oh,
how to get there.
yeah.
And you might as well put, and what, and milestones. So put a comma there, put a comma and milestones, and then we'll drop the and out of the strategies. Okay, then leave it there. That's fine. Do it just like that. That's fine. That's cleaner. Breeze are better.
Great, good
How's
change.
that read?
Looks good. Looks like excellent changes to me.
Yeah.
You need a comma after implementing up top, just grammar.
Yes. Dave, yes. People have differences on that opinion, but I would, Dave.
Sure, well, but Microsoft Word was agreeing that it needed to be added.
Oh, I got that too, Dave, but.
Yeah.
Says
Just
says
me.
the journalist, what does he know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the rules. I just follow what Microsoft
Yeah,
Word
no,
wants me to do.
I'm with you on that one. Okay. And then to do, show view, no markups, so they can see what it looks like. So go to review.
Oh, she didn't do that.
Oh, then just, okay, just make it all black. Okay, there you go. It's fine. Stay.
When we've added annually, do we want to say in the first quarter or the fourth quarter, just to be like, when is annually? Is it right now? Is it next month?
So I'm gonna shoot for the end of the year, Dave, but
Okay.
The fourth quarter ends up being, we got budget stuff to
Sure,
do.
sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think annually is good. That gives a little bit of flexibility as a group.
Are we good? Are we good with this?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay. Don't want to rush anybody, but you want to vote on it?
yes.
Okay, so did we already do, I'm sorry, but did we do the motion and second yet?
I
No,
don't think so.
Okay, so if somebody needs to
Oh,
make.
it's like, move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve policy 18, strategic plan, revision 5 as presented on the
And as amended, just add,
and as appended on the recommendation of the general manager.
Second,
okay, all in favor? How about,
Do roll call, just.
Aye.
Marlena Beta, I.
Talbot, I think that's 4-0 again, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Good
All right.
edit. All
Good.
right, and what do we got
Next
next?
All right, policy 30, vehicle use policy. So this was 8 pages. A lot of these policies are very long. And so what we want to do is we look at policies as being direction that the Board of Commissioners provide to RMLD through the general manager. This particular one, we thought, so the majority of it, we're going to move to a procedure. It'll be an internal procedure, but we still thought that there were key elements of policy 31 vehicle use that needed to be on this, that were comprehensive in terms of these are the key pieces of the procedure. And we tightened it down. We added several items. There's a description there. We might as well bring it up and take a look at it. It's only a page and a half. But you know, the key piece of it indicates more clearly that there are responsibilities and duties to using company-owned vehicles. And it's in terms of how the vehicles are treated, and also responsibilities of the employees while they are driving them. And the first one, so you can take a look at it. It's right. So go down to whoever got the screen, scroll to the actual clean version of the policy. It's probably easier to look at it this way. I think the key pieces are the policy elements. We can walk through each one of them unless you guys have some particular pieces, but we focus right out of the gate. Drugs and alcohol, Bob knows us intimately well. We are a electric utility, safety first and foremost. So we brought that up and made that very clear. And then we went to the second piece, right? Vehicles are for official work purposes only, unless expressly, authorized to go to a conference or whatever. If we do have vehicles for the engineers in particular, as an example, where they have company cars that they can use to take home. So we have 2 categories: take home and not take home. If they are a take home vehicle, we want to make sure, and everybody, there's nobody new here, but they understand that there is a tax implication if they use the vehicles for commuting, and that's nothing to do with us. It's IRS type stuff. There's, item 4 is I'll just real quickly, the key things of it, responsibility to take care of the vehicle, responsibility to make sure that it's maintained. We have a facilities team that actually maintains the vehicles. There's the safety piece that goes back to 6, pre-trip inspection. If there's anything wrong, that should be documented and identified as quickly as possible. 8, distracted driving prohibited. That's a state law anyways. It ties to cell phone service, but distracted as a little broader perspective. Only RMLD employees are allowed to operate vehicles. Seem pretty basic and simple, but these are things. Is there anything 12, smoking, vaping, etc. Prohibited. No firearms or weapons. Item 13. The operator, right? 14, right? All of our job descriptions have the requirement to have a license, a driving license of some form. If you're operating any of the trucks, it needs to be a CDL. And you're supposed to report moving violations and any accidents, of course. There's a whole accident procedure as well. But we tried to keep it very tight so that everybody in the company actually reads these procedures. We brought these procedures, when I don't know the exact number, but 31 procedures, average length of 6 pages. They don't usually get read, and so we're trying to tighten them up so that from a policy perspective, and then there's procedures behind it. But we want the key policy pieces to be clear to everybody, and when they have questions, they can ask it. So this goal here was, as we've done in the past, a streamlining, but also we paid a lot of attention to what actually went in there, and we've spent several discussions to try and refine this down. Anyways, so we like the end result. Any questions, thoughts, reactions? Go ahead.
I just have a couple clarifying questions. So on number 6, before you choose, the driver will complete a pre-trip inspection and submit written documentation per procedure. I read that and say every time you use it, you have to submit written documentation.
No, the procedure will be if there's a problem. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they have access to whatever that procedure is.
So the procedure will be, if there's something wrong.
Okay,
bumpers hanging off of the light doesn't appear to, you know,
and in that case, are they
but pre-trip inspections. always-
authorized to use the vehicle at that point?
It'll depend
or
upon
they're-
the severity of the issue.
Okay, and that's also in the procedure?
Correct.
Okay. Distracted driving is prohibited. You said mass law, so that's defined in that mass law and what distracted driving constitutes?
I have to double check with Janet again, who gave us that language.
Okay.
So I'm fairly, so I believe I am 80% certain. 'Cause
You
we
might
got-
want to, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I was gonna say, I mean, you might want to delete that one only because there's many things that are going to be prohibited, including drunk driving, speeding, you know, driving on the wrong side of the road, distracted driving, everything that's not legal would also be. So, or just change it to, they must adhere to all applicable laws.
I like the idea of, I think the distracted driving probably mostly speaks to cell phone usage, and we don't explicitly call that out elsewhere, and I think that's important to
Why don't I say distracted
expectation.
driving with an emphasis on cell phone usage?
Mhm.
Or if there's a piece of that that's over and above what state law already prohibits, maybe you say you must comply with all laws. Additionally, may not do X, Y, or Z if there's something that's more than what's already in the law.
Yeah, you know, Dave, that's actually an interesting idea. The reason why we put this one out is that, you know, we have an 8-page procedure.
Yep.
And, you know, the informal poll is how many people read the 8-page procedure? Few.
Right.
And people read Massachusetts state law? Fewer. So, and this one we think is important. So,
Okay. All right.
No texting and driving. Keep, my opinion, keep it in there, but, distracted driving is prohibited as per MGL. Right?
Yep.
Cover your butt.
okay.
But you definitely, because, talking on the phone, if there's, technology in the car that lets you do that, that's not
Well,
distracted
that's not
driving.
just exactly right.
Right,
I
is
think that's why,
hands-free okay
I
versus
think that-
not?
Right,
Yeah.
you're not, we don't need to define that, technology defined it, you get, now you're getting back into the,
Yeah.
all the crap you just pulled out, right?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty,
Mhm.
it's distracted, is driving is prohibited, you know,
We'll just-
as.
and
per
we'll
the-
add as, so on 8, we'll add comma as per MGL or Mass General laws. We'll write out Mass General law.
That makes sense.
You got it up? Okay, we're not on the screen. This is helpful. Thank you guys for doing this. In a minute, she's gonna just scroll it up here and scroll down to 8. And we just write out Massachusetts general law, just yeah, Massachusetts general law.
Close enough.
No, spell it out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, cause you don't know, you don't wanna, cause it's too, there's too many of them,
Oh, it's,
and maybe.
and we're trying, yeah. We're trying to emphasize key points for the employees. I mean, this all seems pretty basic stuff, but
But you also want to be able to point to it if there's something that
That's true, too.
happens and
Yeah.
then have it not be
Yeah.
ambiguous.
Right.
Yeah, you do need to, add a line in here that, this is the policy. That you are subject to a drug test. Per the policy.
there's a whole policy that talks about drug tests.
Well, yeah, vehicle use, there's specifically, you need to have something in vehicle use that says,
Okay, there's 0 tolerance, and maybe we add there,
Yeah.
and all drivers are subject to drug tests
drug
per
testing per,
the associated policy. I'm talking, I mean.
yeah,
whatever
yeah, I
policy.
just, you need to, you know, if, there has to be a statement in there that says, you know, if you get into an accident.
Well, there's a whole process that we, I mean,
That is correct.
there's a procedure. Okay, good. So we'll add, vehicles, or driving vehicles, comma, so just no comma. And all drivers are subject to drug testing.
Yeah.
On policy or element 16, what are CDL drivers?
Commercial driver's
Commercial
license.
license.
Yeah, and that applies to, so our larger vehicles, not the pickup trucks, but the bucket trucks and the diggers and the wires, those all require Class B CDL licenses. Just given the size of the vehicles.
Right, quick question. I know in some other communities with CDL drivers,
You good?
they do random testing.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you know, Bob's point to say, hey, so we actually have a random drug test policy.
Right.
It's in place. It has been
Right.
in place for a long time. But I think, you know, Bob's suggestion to add that text that we just did to to 0.1, just makes it more clear up front. I think that's a good
Yeah,
suggestion.
and if you are gonna add that for a drug test, you might just wanna go drug/alcohol. Yeah.
Okay,
Just
great.
Suggestion.
Subject to drug/alcohol testing. That's great.
Would you just do your,
Not telling the board, just,
Why don't we say that testing consistent with RMLD policy and procedure? We have a whole,
right.
we're working
sure
through that. We're actually working through that piece because it's another 10 pager. And we probably won't trim that one down because that's got different kind of legal implications. Look, that one's not for today. It's coming.
Right.
We're not quite ready for it yet. This, you would think this is pretty straightforward. It's not. You'd have to think this stuff through and you need legal advice and
Absolutely.
for all the reasons you guys mentioned. So that's why we do 1 or 2.
One small note is that the few places where they're called municipal vehicles, shouldn't they be called utility vehicles? And it says municipal work purposes, but you probably want utility work purposes.
Hadn't
Just running municipal line.
Or RMLD, because we're not talking about the municipality, we're talking about RMLD.
You know, that's actually a good point, Dave, because on 14, 15, we actually have RMLD. So
Right, you have RMLD a lot of places, but up top you have a few that are municipal.
by driving, what we'll say,
Change
So-
them all to RMLD.
yeah, let's just do it right now. So on 1,
Okay.
let's change, change that to RMLD.
And that's,
And on 3, right in front of 3,
Yeah.
no, just well there. That's fine. If a, so 3, if a, Dave, and or A for RMLD. And sounds better. Okay, good.
why are you calling them municipal work purposes? In there, if you're
municipal, just official work
Yeah.
purposes. Okay,
installing a meter at somebody's house, it's not municipal work.
that's fine. No, I like fewer words, so I'm a
Yeah.
fan. Let's see. RMLD vehicles, I think, just looking quickly, the rest of them are RMLD vehicles. Hey, go ahead.
Just on our first line, the line that was taken out from, I think, section 6. Some paragraph B, it's in the stricken version. So the employee may be subject to post-accident drug and alcohol testing as required by applicable laws, regulations, and RMLD policies and relevant collective bargaining agreements. Maybe you can shrink that down. Employee, vehicle use is subject to drug and alcohol testing as required by, use that same sentence. Just say, vehicle use is subject to that, rather than have, and all drivers are subject to drug and alcohol testing
I'll
consistent.
just use a different sentence than that.
Just use the sentence that came out
You got
of,
it, section 6, where'd you get it?
it came out of section 6 in the accident procedures.
Yep, we have all
20
action.
And it's in the stricken version, and it's in some paragraph B. The first sentence.
Just the first sentence. Okay.
Yeah.
On page 7 of the edited version, or you can just, I just read it too if you want, whatever's easiest for you. Instead of the and all drivers, the suggestion is to delete that, leave the period there, and add the following sentence. And we'll say an employee may be subject to post-accident drug and alcohol testing.
Omit post-accident, may be subject to.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, you're right. Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right. Delete, yeah. Testing as required by applicable laws, comma, regulations, comma, and RMLD policies and relevant collective bargaining agreements. In this case, Dave, no comma.
Okay,
Are you with me on that one?
whatever Microsoft Word says.
Great, thank you. Okay, good. I like it.
All right, we good?
Yes, sir.
So
Thank you.
motion,
Over to you, Pam.
Move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve policy 31 vehicle use revision 2 as presented on the recommendation of the general manager. As presented and amended on the recommendation of the general manager.
Second,
all in favor?
Let's
Talbot,
go.
aye?
Marlena Beta, I.
Gastelakis, aye.
Okay, great, 4-0 again. By the way, is Phil, Phil said he was landing at 6:30. Anybody know if he's gonna join the meeting late?
We got delayed and will not be joining.
Say again?
We believe he was delayed to a point where he's not going to be able to be here tonight. That's the
Okay.
latest information Erica just shared.
Okay, because I may need to drop a little early, like in a few minutes.
You
How
want to
many
do the pass
items-
right now?
Say again?
Do you want to do the pass to Marlena now?
Maybe, yeah, and then I'll stay as long as I can. So yeah, how about that? We'll hand off the chairmanship to Marlena and, or whoever, but yeah, that's fine.
Is that good for you?
So Marlene, you good?
Good. Actually say anything to do that.
You could just say on to,
Okay, on to procurement requests, board approval.
all right. So we have two in front of you tonight. This first one is RMLD IFP 23-37, being the 37th this year. This one is for pad mount transformers. You know, we talk about transformers a lot. The background on this is we have an ongoing need of replenishing because we install them in the field on a regular basis for both growth and replacement of aging ones. So this particular one, it's the second one that we're issuing for pad mount transformers in 2023. After we awarded the former one back in March of 2023, there remained approximately $643,000. So we tuned up and updated the specifications. It was sent out to 11 vendors. We included 4 items, 4 different types of pad mounted transformers. The response, we received 3 responses. And where one of the companies, Wesco, submitted 2 different versions of the response. As recommended, the pricing comparison. So on the back of your page, of the proposals were reviewed, analyzed, and evaluated by staff, including the technical team for adherence to the technical specs. The purchasing team went through the details of all of the other bid requirements. The recommendation was to award it to Wesco, who is a distributor. We've done a lot of business with them in the past, for $659,580. On the back of the page, there are the various proposals, but the second proposals that Wesco put together, they were fully compliant, fully responsive, and they appear to be fully responsive based on the past experience. These are all GE transformers, and they range from 37.5 to 100 kVA transformers. There's more details here, but questions relative to this is a pretty standard process for us. Yeah, go ahead, Pam.
It's a question on the, so the Wesco bid, the note says this is a proposal. The quote is valid for 30 days. Is that valid as long as we then
Yeah, so
officially award it or put out the purchase order and then the price is fixed, or is there any risk of price change?
oh, these particular, so there are, as we talked about last time, some people will come back with price change provisions. This one doesn't have any. The bid was received September 30th. I'm sorry, September 13th.
Okay.
So our intention is to present it to you guys and have it approved. So that's within the 30-day period.
Okay, so they all are at risk of, no matter who we award it to, there could be a change in the pricing, or this pricing is fixed once.
These prices, these particular ones are fixed. This particular project is a fixed price.
Okay,
Yeah, and the delivery times are 37 to 36 weeks. Now, interestingly enough, right? You know, all of these are the same transformers that we had bid last time through. And last time, earlier, back in the March, we just did some quick examples. So it was 37 weeks for delivery times. The delivery times have moved out to 40 weeks or so. And the prices, actually, yeah, the prices have come down a bit, which is good. So we are interested in executing this, and we'll talk about transformers literally every other period, because they're a hot commodity, and we need them to run our network.
So what is the reason, and I know Bob does this all day long too, the first Wesco bid shows the Eaton product coming in at 209 weeks, is that?
Yeah, so they're a distributor, so they have.
I know you didn't go with that one, but
Yeah, no, but literally there's some of these, 209 weeks, right? And where a year is 52 weeks.
Yeah.
Like literally, so we are not, we're dealing with an order that we placed a year ago. And there's some confusion in terms of, there's some paperwork issues. But they basically reminded us that the current delivery times for that particular product, it's not this one, but 200 plus weeks. Crazy.
Okay.
So this is part of the reason why we need to stay, we might typically do this once a year, every 2 years. We're doing this 2, maybe 3 times a year. It's fast. I mean, we're looking at a whole bunch of other ways to maybe increase the orders. But this is a critical item for our operation.
all right.
But yeah, 200 weeks is not. Go ahead, Bob.
Everybody and their brother is over ordering, and you get one natural disaster after another, and it just depletes the supply. And it just puts more and more pressure, especially on customer-driven jobs, that you have customers with work that is complete, that waiting for transformers. So, they're sitting there with buildings complete in the dark that they can't energize, and you're telling some people 6 months, a year before I can provide you a product. And it's industry wide, and it's not just New England or
Right, it's
but
not just transformers, it's switchgear, it's
every single element of the trade business. And the smaller you are,
Yes.
the less the less buying
We're a
power
big
you have.
MLP, but we're a little player in the big fish of, in the
Yeah.
big pond of
So
buying transformers.
you basically are buying factory slotted time in the future, and I'm shocked they're giving you a fixed price point.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well,
usually-
because look at the time horizon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the only reason why.
Yeah.
Remember when we did the distribution the substation transformers?
Yeah.
One of the bids was, hey, I'll give you a fixed price right now, but it's only valid for a year, and delivery is 3 years out.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. So
All right.
it's
Well, if there's any further discussion,
Thank
then
you.
maybe we should move
yeah,
this one along.
yeah, exactly.
All right. Pam?
Sure. Move that IFP 2023-37 for pad mounted transformers be awarded to Wesco Distribution Incorporated for $659,580 pursuant to MGLC 164, section 60, on the recommendation of the general manager.
Can we have a second?
Second,
Thanks, Dave. Marlene DeVita, aye.
That's
Talbot,
what
aye.
Ms. Coulter, aye.
4-0.
Thank you.
All right, the next item.
So the next item is RMLD IFB 203-48. This is the removal and transportation and disposal and remediation of hazardous materials, including emergency response services. So this is an ongoing, this is a 3-year contract. Our current one needs to be renewed, so we sent it out. It's basically on call or as needed contracting services for the remediation and again, the same thing, immediate transportation, disposal of PCB contaminated materials. Some of the old transformers have PCBs, also non-PCB contaminated materials. It could be simple as a hydraulic oil spill from a truck where a hose broke. It could be a transformer failure because the base rusted out and we had an oil leak. It's a whole broad set of it. So this basically is I'll call it a blanket contract. It is for 3 years. It also includes recycling of batteries, fluorescent tubes. We have an oil and gas separator. So it's basically the remediation. The previous bid that went out, that we did 3 years ago, was with a company called ACV. The new recommended vendor is a company called Green Site Services. We have an ongoing licensed site professional, LSP, that's Cushing and Jamalo. They're our authorized agent to supervise remediation activities under this agreement. They know this vendor, Green Site Services. They're well respected. We have worked with them in the past, but our recommendation. So from a bid perspective, they were the most responsive and responsible. There's background there between the Clean Harbors bid and the Green Site bid. There were some exceptions taken to the Green Harbors bid. The price difference in terms of the examples were slightly higher for Green Site Services, as you can see by the example provided, but there are no exceptions taken. So the recommendation of the RMLD team was to award it to Green Site Services. Go ahead.
If I may, Green Site Services, what's their size? I'm just, obviously Clean Harbors is the giant.
They're massive, yeah.
Yeah, in the room. I'm just not, I'm not about to say that I need to know them, but you said you have not worked with them?
We have not worked with them, but our LSP, Cushing and Jamala, has worked in the past. They're very well respected. I don't know a sense of size, but they're not a new entity. They've been around for a while. They're not Clean Harbor size. But there wasn't any concern from Cushing and Jamalo or from the research that our purchasing people did, concerned about the size. I know we talked about with MVA transformers at one point in time, we did a little extra research on them. I don't have the detailed answer to the question other than Jamalo, Cushing and Jamalo. We did our research. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fine.
Was there any feedback from the 15 companies that decided not to bid on why?
Too busy.
And when it says job A and job B, are they both here at Ash Street?
No, they were examples. So every job is a little bit different. They're typically in the field. There's not typically stuff done here. But on any given week, there's, out of the 3,600 transformers, some of them are old. Not every given week, probably once a month. We have something, and while we will do all the electrical work and pick it up, we have to have somebody licensed to handle the materials. And, it's a state requirement, so we need to have. So that's why we subcontract it out.
Any further discussion?
Move that IFB 2023-48 for removal, transportation, disposal, and remediation of hazardous materials, including emergency response services, be awarded to Green Site Services Group Incorporated for an estimated amount of $50,000 per year, pursuant to MGL C30, Section 39M, as the lowest responsible and eligible bidder on the recommendation of the general manager.
Do you have a second?
Second,
Marlena Beta, I.
Talbot, aye.
That's what I can say.
Sculptor,
And I do have to drop now, folks. So,
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks very much. Okay, have a nice night.
Moving on to our strategic plan with General Manager Greg.
I am so excited to talk about this. And I mean that seriously. I'm fascinated by this. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna ask you, get uploaded the town website. I don't know if I can't find it on your website, but it's
Oh, yeah, we can.
yes,
Use mine.
I'll watch it up here, but I'm doing it for.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So I'm going to try and keep this to 20 minutes and do Q&A. I mean, there's,
20?
this is not 100-page,
20 minutes.
binder. Yeah. Okay. 10 minutes. Fine. I'll be fast.
That's it.
All right. Good. Thank you. Mission vision, real short and sweet. So we took the original one, we modified it in the context. So as you can see on slide 3, go to the next slide. I'm going to just hit highlights here. So go next slide down, 2 slides down, 1, 2. Oh, am I supposed to control it? Yep, I guess I got it. Okay, great. Okay, perfect. Okay. So mission. So again, we talked about mission, what we do, vision, where we're going, strategy, how do we get there, and goals or milestones. Mission, right? So we tried to clean this up. The internal organization recognizes these words: reliable, low cost, non-carbon. You guys would recognize them as well. So the RMLD team team's mission, right, is to serve our customers. So there's a team emphasis, there's who we're serving, and what do we deliver? Reliable, low cost, and we put increasingly non-carbon energy, because right now we are not 100% non-carbon, as we talked about in the portfolio. So that's who we are, and that is going to stay in place. I mean, we can change it, we'll give our input on it, but that's how we kind of look at ourselves. The vision, we spent some time trying to trim this down, but the vision is that the RMLD team's vision is to innovatively support electrification. That is a state mandate, right? And the required transition to non-carbon energy with customer engagement. Again, we're trying to focus on the customer, we're trying to focus on electrification, and the transition to increasingly non-carbon. Those are short, sweet. The organization can wrap their heads around it. Yeah, I'll take any input on it, but we kind of like it. Any reactions?
Put the word responsible. Add the word responsible.
Add responsible?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say in the vision, responsible.
Okay,
Sorry,
good.
where would you put responsible?
I would put in the, well, either one in the mission, probably in the mission be better than vision. You know,
Is responsible to serve our customers?
well, I'd say, reliable, low cost,
Increasingly non-carbon?
well, responsible, transition to a responsible transition to non-carbon energy.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a better place to put it. Response, yeah. And the,
We can all convert it all at all costs, but that's not responsible.
got it.
Correct.
Good point. And so I'll make that edit to the vision. I'll put it in the vision and we'll do a little wordsmithing on that one. I'm not going to read through the executive summary. You know, it's meant to be a quick summary. I'm gonna hit a couple of key pieces of the slide. I'll literally get it done in 10 minutes. So on slide, oh, I got the controller, right? So slide 5, right? This is external. So we looked at the context, right? So if you're going to do something, like what's the world that you're doing all this in, right? What's the context? So external view and internal view. You know, from the external perspective, we talked about it before, we called it the seismic impact that the 2021 climate bill has on how we run the business, right? And if you guys remember the key pieces of the 2021 climate bill, otherwise known as S9, is now climate law. But it did two, and from us, it did two major things. One is that it requires our customers to increasingly use non-carbon energy for transportation, which equates to EVs. There might be hydrogen as well, but EVs is the current method. And there's a target of 2035 to no longer sell internal combustion, no longer to sell light duty vehicles with internal combustion engines. So I should take one step back in terms of the context. That the big picture is this transition to electrification and decarbonation is driven by legislation. And so our view is not to get into the discussion of is the legislation fair or not fair. It is what laws, what rules do we have to follow and how do we get there? The other working assumption we have is those, regulation and legislation can change, right? It can change, over time. It could change, with an election. Our working assumption for all of this is that the current laws will remain in place for the foreseeable future. We don't currently see any softening of those. There is a potential that they could tighten. But our working assumption for the model going forward is this is what it is. And so there's the issue in terms of transportation. And from that transportation requirement, we basically have put together models in terms of EV growth adoption. You heard me talk extensively about data analytics, and so you're going to see a lot of data here in a few minutes. We're not going to get too deep into it, but at the end of the day, load is increasing and EV is a key driver of it. The other piece is buildings, transition to buildings. Right now in our service territory, based on some of the work that we did with Ready Climate Action Committee over the past 2 years, about 50% of our customers use oil to heat their houses, and about 45% use natural gas, and the balance are propane, and there are a couple of electrical and some air source heat pumps. Over time, the state law is trying to drive the electrification of the heating and cooling of buildings. Cooling is already, for the most part, already done with either window air conditioners or central air conditioners. So there's that electrification piece. There's also a piece that we've talked about before, and this is, and we choose our words very carefully on this. This was also a topic that ISO New England presented at the NEPA meeting a couple of weeks back, and there are a few slides here that we probably won't get to tonight. But one of the things that he talked about was that as we transition to increasingly non-carbon, there is an inherent fragility. Again, ISO New England the responsibility is to maintain the reliability of the network. They don't own the assets. They are there to administer and manage them. So we are looking at what they're seeing, as we've talked about in the past, the Mystic generation plant, which is about 1,600 megawatts. It will be closed in May of 2024. That has implications in its own right. The overall capacity of the network is roughly 35,000 megawatts. 1,600 is not trivial, but it will be taken off. And there's a lot of other retirements that are scheduled, and that's one of the things that Gordon Van Willy talked about in his presentation as well. In addition, if that property, well, not if, it will close, but it also puts at risk the Everett Marine Terminal, which is adjacent to it. That has implications for the natural gas network. Natural gas right now represents about half of the energy generated in New England. The other things that are happening, as you guys know, there are plans for up to 17,000 megawatts of offshore wind, with the exception of one project. The other projects have been canceled, and they're trying to rebid them. At the end of the day, there are significant delays, and there are more likely cost increases to the offshore wind stuff. In addition, right now, there is capacity in the transmission network to handle up to about 6,000 megawatts of that offshore wind. After that, new transmission systems need to be built. That's a challenge in its own right. So there's a lot of elements that are basically saying that the external context is becoming more challenging. Internally, again, I'll just go real quickly, just quick highlights. I want to get to the data. Given our current load and our current load forecast, our power supply portfolio is in good shape. It needs to be managed. But as we've talked about before, we're migrating to more and more intermittent resources. And, while, and there's the issue associated with the retirement of certificates in terms of what we claim for compliance. But if you look at the actual portfolio, increasingly so a good portion of our network, of our supply from the hydro perspective, hydro is in the high 20s right now. Our intention was to have it in the low 20s, but anyways, it's tied to lower demand, et cetera. So we're not doing a whole lot of our hedge right now is nearly 95%, and that is partially due to 2023 has been a fairly mild year, and so kilowatt hour sales or the demand that we've needed to serve has been lower than we had anticipated. That's fine. It's good, but that basically moves some of our portfolios up. We are unique as RMLD. We have two tie points. We tie to both the Eversource transmission system and to the National Grid transmission system. Station 4 is Eversource. Station 3 is National Grid. As you guys know, we'll talk about it at subsequent meetings. I'll do a little bit of update in terms of the general manager update, but we are also in the process of putting substation 6 in place, currently scheduled to be on Ballard Vale. That'll create another tie point on the grid network. And then when the Maple Meadow project ultimately materializes, there'll be a fourth tie point to the Eversource. Again, that's important from a reliability perspective. So those are some key points. Our battery storage system right now, we have a 5 megawatt 2-hour battery system. As you guys know from the past approvals, we're planning to add another 30 megawatts of nearly 3 hours by early 2025. That's going to be for both reliability and also for peak management. I'm going to go quickly to slide 7. So there's 3 quick slides here, and I'll go faster. But this is a load forecast between 2023 and 2050. It nearly doubles. We go from nearly a little bit over, just under 700,000 megawatt hours of sales up to a little over 1.2 million. If you look at those stacked bar charts, there's a lot of detail in here, but the key thing is above the orange, the residential, it's the blue and the light blue. The dark blue is EV. When you say EV residential, any of the fleet vehicles are captured in the industrial and the commercial, mainly the industrial. But that is really resident. That's home-based, individuals that drive sedans and SUVs around transitioning. We made the assumption that it's not quite 100% adoption. A lot of the forecasts have the adoption in 2045, 100%. We thought that's a little bit optimistic. So we're a little bit softer, not much, 97% by 2050. There are about 55,000 vehicles in our service territory. Right now, there are approximately 1,000 EVs in our service territory. So there's a long way to go, right? So you can look on the left, 2026, we begin to see some pieces. You get to 2038, right? It starts getting big and it's noteworthy in 2050. So key pieces, EV is a key adoption. Remember, we talked about legislation. So we're designing this around the current legislation. That could change. Adoption could be faster, it could be slower. Air source heat pump is an important piece of it, but it's not as dominant as EVs. If we look at this is now monthly load shape, and there's a couple of key things behind the monthly load shape here. Each of those blocks, 2023, there's 3 blocks, 2023, 2038, 2050. 2023, as you notice, and again, the same blocks, orange is residential, the green is commercial, and the yellowish across the top is industrial. On the far right-hand side, you'll see the addition of the dark blue and the light blue, and that's what it looks like on a month-by-month basis. So that's important in terms of how we think about the network and the intermittent nature of it. 2 things, a couple of key things come about. One is the summer load between 2023 to 2050, it's about 60% higher. But the winter load basically doubles. So the winter load in January of 2023, and we look at January of 2050, it's nearly twice the size of it. That's expected due to the air source heat pumps and EV charging. We put a small assumption in on EV charging that EVs in the wintertime are typically about 15% less efficient. So there's 15% more we have to drop in. If we go to then a daily load shape, and can we move that window just a little bit off that piece? You go to the upper right hand corner.
Can I just ask a tiny question?
Any question?
Here. Why in 2038 and 2050 do you have the EV? It's not even a sliver in July. Wouldn't they still be charging their cars in July?
Can you go back? Either one of you guys just go back and slide.
Right, she has it up now. And
Oh no! Not the EV, but the air source heat pump.
oh, wrong color. Okay.
Yeah, the EVs are there. Air source heat pumps smaller. It's still there. So it's already. So that is purely that blue is the incremental load. So the assumption is that the air conditioning load that's already there right now is in the orange, and this would be so. The working assumption is that air source heat pumps are replacing existing window air conditioners and existing central. They tend to be a little bit more efficient. They'll be a little more of a net. It's a net neutral perspective. That's why they're disappearing.
Okay.
Sorry, the question on this too. Are you,
Which one? I'm sorry.
so in this modeling, are you assuming any average temperature change for the months over the course of this?
No, we're not. We're not assuming any increase in temperatures. Weather. That's a great question. Weather is the driver of our load. So we're not, and we're basically, so we talked about data analytics. We've got some really sharp guys doing really good analytic work now, which is how we're able to create, go down to the hourly basis, which I'll show you in just a second. But, and again, we continue to update the model, but this is pretty insightful stuff.
It's great. I think it would be useful for us
But
to
we could
look at a
put a
sensitivity analysis around average temperature changes over the next 20
that's a
years.
great idea. This one is 9, and the reason why this one's in the summary slide deck is, remember how we've been talking consistently about, so that top, both of those charts on the left hand side of this chart, those are basically an average load curve for RMLD from midnight to noon to midnight. So across the bottom are basically 24 hours. That curve looks very flat, and the reason why it looks very flat, it's actually from the bottom to the top, it's a factor of 2x, but because of the way the shape, because I had to make the other piece, it looks flat than it is. But we've said consistently that our intention for EVs is to have EVs charge overnight. So for the next 10 years, great. But if you go out to, this is a snapshot of 2043, and if we have 80% of our EVs in our territory, again, a lot of assumptions in the model, but that orange line is what the load would look like. That top chart is not the right way to design your rate structure to have everybody charge overnight. So that scenario 4, which is the bottom left-hand side, is, what would we need to do in terms of the 3 general blocks we have overnight, morning, and then peak afternoon what would it look like to get a flat curve? And that bottom curve, and there's a lot more detail behind it, but just big picture, it would be 40% overnight. The reason why this is important, and we're doing the analysis now, is we've talked to you, several times, and we'll put it into the rate structure, but we want to have a real EV rate. And this basic, and our working assumption is that most customers in terms of residential load are not going to change their habits dramatically. They're still going to have dinner between 7 and 8, or whatever pattern they're on right now, they're going to continue. The only thing new is going to be EVs, and there are not a lot of EVs, and it's going to be a learned behavior. So what we're trying to think through here is when we start, and I say training very nicely, when we try establishing behaviors of our customers, we need to think about what these curves are going to look like, so we have the flexibility into it. We've talked a little bit about some transactive, anyways, there's a whole bunch of different things we've talked about, but this analysis, which, it's hot off the press here the past couple of weeks, is having us to rethink how we look at rate design, particularly for EVs. So enough of that fascinating stuff. The other piece, and I'll finish on this one, and then go to one last slide. This is demand. So what before was load, those are megawatt hours sold by the network. This is demand of the network, and the demand is the peak of the network. So again, same basic structure on the left-hand side, 2023. This is what our peaks look like. Our peak is typically in July. It's roughly the peak of the network, not when we run the generator. If we discount out our generation in terms of doing peak reduction, et cetera, our network still has to handle roughly about 170 megawatts of load. That orange line across the top, RMLD capacity, our networks is designed to be about 220 megawatts. So we have a nice safety buffer, which you want to design into a system. So we're in good shape today. As you go to the far right, 2050, again, you see the same loads. Now these are demands, okay? They're not hours of sales. It's like what at any individual hour, what does the peak look like? And as you can see, our current network is designed for 220. And we look at July of 2050, and it looks like it's close to 300. Now, what's not in that 220 is the addition of our new substation. That'll actually move that up to probably 270. But nevertheless, what we're looking at is what is load going to do going forward, and how do we design the network going forward to handle the upcoming EV load? And again, we made the very basic assumption is that legislation is driving that adoption curve, right? And here's what it is now. So we're modeling around that. If that changes, we can adjust the models, but that's what we're going to work with. What this basically tells us is that at some point, and roughly in the mid 2030s, early 2030s, we're going to be overstressing our network. So we need, so when we put transformers in place, typical life of transformers roughly 30 years, substation 40 years, wires 40 years. So the things that we're doing now need to anticipate where our load is going. So this is why all this analysis is important. Any questions on this one?
So if you were to draw the orange line for 2050, where would it be?
It'd be right around, so at our current, where we need to put it?
Where we want to put it, right?
We need to put it somewhere in the,
75, something like
no.
that.
And there needs to be a safety, it needs to be above that 300. So 320, 330.
Okay, not quite 375, but
Not 375.
between
Yeah, so
3 and 350.
Again, there's a whole bunch of things we're going to do, because if you look at it, that blue line is a key driver, and that blue line is assuming how many vehicles are charging simultaneously, and a lot of the models assume somewhere between 30 and 35%. We have this one set at 20%. That's still a big number. 20% of the users charging simultaneously. And when we were doing this, it was before the hurricane, right? 2 weeks ago, right? It's Friday afternoon, and we're looking at these data in the model, and everybody's, we're all getting ready for the storm that is about to come, right? That didn't really materialize. But what do people do, right? Batteries, water, milk, eggs. And if everybody's running electric, and fill up your cars. So in the future, if you fill up your cars, it's electricity. So we're trying to think about all these things that are coming down the road. So all said and done, no surprise, right? Work to be done, but we're trying to say, where does the work to be done, and how do we need to design the network going forward? We talked about power slide before, so I'll finish on slide 12. So key initiatives, this is where there'll be details, and we'll talk about them in the budget review in October and November, in terms of, so how do you make, this doesn't all happen, right? It costs money. And, as Bob reminded us, right, we put the word responsible into, how we make this happen. We have to do this in a balanced fashion. One of the things that's in some of the previous slides is that we now where we didn't before, we have access to dollars that we never had access to before. So historically, we had all of this had to be on the backs of the ratepayers. Now it's going to be, in addition to that, the ability to do grants, ITCs, et cetera. So we're trying to wrap all this stuff together. We're trying to make it fit. These are some key initiatives on the left-hand side here. At the end of the day, it's all driven, allowing us to build out our distribution network and allow us to run as efficiently as possible. That's that bottom line. But if you kind of go back, to the pieces that are prerequisites to that, first is acquire land. And so we've been talking a little bit about land. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in the executive session. But that's an action item now. Energy storage, we talked about that before. You guys know, we talked about it a few moments ago. We've got 30 megawatts coming. We're looking at long-term battery storage. Battery storage is not perfect. It's not the end all be all, but it's a piece of the puzzle that we need to put into it. We've talked many times, Maple Meadows is a good example of this item 3, build generation. That's within territory generation. We are doing some exploration outside of it, but our real focus right now is how do we generate within our territory? And the reason to generate within our territory, as you guys know, capacity and transmission costs are just under 40% of our cost structure, and they're going to increase. They're going to get higher and higher. So we're not planning to be independent from the grid. We're trying to establish, what's a reasonable target. Might be 40%, but when we get out to the the early part of 2030s, we want to be able to generate somewhere in the range of, thinking about plans, targets, 40% of our power is generated within our territory. There's a net savings by doing that. Solar will be part of it, but there's not enough land to make that all work. The metering project it's going to allow us to monitor all this stuff. I've got installed workflow billing. For another time, we can talk about Cogsdale. Our internal platforms for the right now are almost all up to date. We were behind, significantly behind in some of our software platforms. They're now up to date. Our security is tight. That's good, but there's, that's ongoing stuff. And then the last piece there before, the second to the last one is transform the campus. That transform the campus is what do we do with this site? That, this building and the operations building is not ideally suited for how we operate right now, but the operations building, as we've talked about before, we need to do something with it. So we either rebuild it or demolish it or do something with it. So that's a catalyst for the transforming of the campus. And that is, we've talked about before, the town has an interest, right, in terms of doing of this site. So there's a discussion for another day that's going to talk about how we transform the campus. That's a discussion right now, but actual actions need to take place in 2025, 26, 27 timeframe. All right, there you go. All right, it was 20 minutes. Sorry, Bob, I really tried to get it done.
Right.
Anytime.
Any discussion on that though? Before we move forward?
I tried.
To Ben Blumenthal doing the finance report.
Thank you, everyone. My apologies for my voice. I'm recovering from COVID from 2 weeks ago. So if I trail off, I'll try to speak up once again. So good evening, everyone. Just waiting for the slide deck to come up. I promise I will be no more than 10 minutes. So this is a brief update on where we stand in terms of our financials and in particular financial milestones. We will be going over a more detailed budget on the October 19th CAB meeting, and then subsequently on October 25th, the Board of Commissioners meeting. So this is just a small tidbit, a little preview of what's to come. As I said, the calendar year 2024 budget is currently being finalized. I'm working with staff right now in order to make sure that all the pieces are together. Greg, I, and Bill are looking over a few other final items. And once we have those pieces together, we will present a formalized budget in those meetings. So you won't see too many of those updates here. In terms of staffing, we have promoted internally 2 staff members. Our longtime senior accountant was just recently promoted to manager of accounting. Our recent staff accountant, who we just brought aboard, has been promoted to senior accountant as he has taken on the entire payroll services here at RMLD. The individual who was in that role wanted to transition to a more hands-on job and a different job trajectory, and we wanted to make sure that we afforded him the opportunity to explore his career growth. And as of this week, this Monday, we have recently onboarded and hired a brand new staff accountant who comes in with Great Plains experience, and he is literally hit the ground running as we speak right now. So I am absolutely thrilled to have such great staff to really complement the work that we're doing here. Moving on, just a quick update. The above the line payment, as you're well aware, the 20-year agreement we issued a payment totaling $913,304 across the 4 towns that we serve. 61 grand for Linfield, North Reading, $167,808. The town of Reading, $197,35,000, and the town of Wilmington of $493,651. This consists of our 2% net plant payments to all 4 towns. The below the line payment to the town of Reading was $1.263 million. This also was processed back in June. And just as an FYI, the next above and below the line payments will be processed in December. Moving on. Our cash balances are extremely strong. As of June 30th, we had approximately $55 million in cash, both in our restricted cash, our restricted investments, and then also our unrestricted cash. We have been very fiscally conscious, aware of the changes within the industry and where we're seeing things go to ensure that we maintain a robust cash reserves, both in the restricted and the unrestricted accounts. It's imperative that we prepare for, our ongoing capital projects in the future by maintaining strong cash numbers right now. The next slide, and you'll have to forgive me, the lines are superimposed, so the blue should be on top and the orange should be on bottom, but that's because of COVID, let's just say. Point being is that our preliminary operating budget numbers are below, or our actuals are actually below our budgeted numbers. We have finalized our June financials, which is approximately $10 million, of which our operating and maintenance costs continue to trend lower due to open positions. We maintained a really, really good control over our headcount, which allows us to ensure that we remain under budget. In addition to that, we continue to manage our expenses against our current budget, and as such, we expect our forecasted expenses to be below budget again this year. The next slide is our capital expenditures. As Greg mentioned, transformers are really, one of our pieces of the bread and butter of our organization. Transformers account for approximately $7 million of our entire capital budget in 2023, this year. And as a result, because of the delay in delivery of these capital items, we are seeing that our capital budget, which is $22.85 million, we've expended 5.1 through July 31st. Capital spending continues to grow. However, because of the delay in the delivery of these important items, we expect our projected spending to be around $12 million at the close of the fiscal year, the budget year, excuse me. Lastly, the final slide, DOE awards. As Greg mentioned, we are we're aggressively pursuing federal money. Federal money comes in several different flavors. We have grant money, we have IRA tax credits, and we have rebate money. The first slug of this federal money through President Biden's infrastructure law, $20 million bill, is what's known as rebates. On September 1st, RMLD was authorized to receive up to $25,000 in rebates for our transformers, and we are processing those first rebates as we speak right now. Furthermore, I've been working very closely with our congressional delegation, both in the Congress and our senators, to continue to push for the grant application money that we had put in earlier this year. And they are reaching out to our colleagues over at DOE to, get more information as we continue to move into the new federal fiscal year. We want to make sure that RMLD is front and center when it comes to the release of those funds. So we've been working very diligently on that. And then lastly, we are also exploring direct payment, IRS payment tax credits back to RMLD, similar to the rebates, but a different program. So these different types of funding sources will allow us to really move boldly forward when it comes to our capital program that we will be presenting in the coming weeks.
Questions or comments for Ben?
Thank you.
Yes, Bob. Karen, sure.
Exciting presentation. Numbers are big.
Mm.
So, so I give you a quick update. So the Green Communities Grant Program, the delegation, our state delegation sent a letter to Department of Energy. I touched base with Brett Haggerty this week and said they were arranging a meeting. So I'll just pass that on to you. We're continuing to push and hoping that we can get that for by the end of the year. And then I always have questions about, and you correct me if I'm focusing on the wrong account. I believe it's the fuel reserve versus the rate stabilization.
Yes.
So regulate at a rate. We plan for where we're going and where we need to get to. And by the way, I appreciate all of the grant activity as well. That's awesome. But I was concerned when the gas line was literally blown up and gas rates spiked. And I think this board had the discussion back then that, oh, our policy said we have a fuel reserve fund for shocks to the system. And somehow gas was not included because we can trust the gas company. There's never going to be shock to the system. So I don't know what, and I've asked the auditors before for the revenues you have now. If you're gonna have a fuel reserve fund, and let me assume you're not the only one who does, what percentage would it be at? What is it now? And the two things I would ask you again to maybe relook at the policy for using that. Why? My understanding is it just gets bigger.
Yeah, we didn't revisit that.
Less flexibility for doing.
Just for clarification, so that account that we spent a lot of time talking about was the rate stabilization fund.
Okay.
All right. The fuel reserve one is one that so our energy costs go up and down literally every day, but every month. And then there's an issue of timing across 3 months in terms of when energy is delivered, when energy is billed, and when we bill our customers. So there's a kind of a 3-month window. That fuel reserve is adjusted literally every month.
Okay, so I have two.
Yeah. So that one is not the rainy day fund.
Yep.
It's the rate stabilization fund. And they happen to be right now. That fuel reserve is a much more volatile. The rate stabilization is the rainy day fund. And this year our total power supply costs, we had forecasted literally a year ago, September, when we did it, September 14th was the snapshot we took. We were anticipating to do roughly $74 million. That was a combination of the cost, primarily the cost of energy was the big issue back then. And then there was the actual use of energy. The number so the target that was set back in 2002 was about 6.5 million. We actually started having a discussion, but I think one of the takeaways we had for that meeting back in the springtime was 10% is probably a reasonable number. So 7.1 million out of 74, 10% of annual fuel of annual. So the rainy day fund would be 10% of our estimated annual power supply cost, which is transmission capacity and fuel. So fuel is one of 3 key components. One of the things that we'll talk about in a few minutes is that we're coming out of a period, 2009 with one exception in 2014, but during the 2010 to 2021, energy prices were very stable. As we talked about recently, we are now in a worldwide energy market, and so there's a massive amount of volatility. So that rainy day fund is for exactly the kind of issues. If a pipeline gets destroyed, a major piece of equipment on the wholesale market falls apart, and the rates, they'll be expensive in January, but they stay expensive in March, April, and May. That's what that's for. So we can talk again about how we might adjust it. But what has changed going forward? Yes, it does. It does sit there, but it is literally insurance. Because one of the things that, you know, it literally is insurance.
But we had a pipeline blown up, the gas shots, and
A couple of, yeah.
they didn't blame it on policy at that time,
Yeah.
but what we did instead is we asked the rate there's a few more, so. Just trying to understand,
Are you talking about the Colonial Pipeline a couple of years back?
no, I'm talking about Europe, the pipeline getting blown, the Russian pipeline getting blown.
Oh, yeah. Okay. yeah. Yeah.
And luckily it resolved itself.
Well, we're not resolved. It's still volatile. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so, and then in previous discussions, or whenever I've asked, does money ever come out of that fund? The answer has always been no. So it's a different kind of fund.
Actually, yeah, that's a great question. So what we actually did year before last is we took $1.6 million out of that fund. And so September, October, November, and December of 2021, we actually took $400,000 each year and basically reduced the fuel charge. So we basically gave it back to the customer, not as a direct check, but we basically applied it. So we actually did. It was higher than that. We actually did recently take $1.6 million out of it. You know, we'll discuss when we get to the rate in terms of what the right number is. So we've done both of those things, but you're exactly right. Going forward, it is a more volatile market, and you know, this is, you know, quote unquote, this is the bank account that we use, those two pieces that we use to dampen. And you know, yeah, and I think, you know, it's interesting this year. Customer bills have been, I've got to finalize the numbers, but maybe 1% higher than they were the previous year. I mean, in terms of net with bills, not rates, but bills, combination of kilowatt hours usage, et cetera. So we'll finish that analysis, but it's been a good year to be an RMLD customer. It's been a great year to be an RMLD customer.
Did you have?
Well,
Question.
that's
As an
significant,
Eversource customer, I can
significant
say that.
temp difference too. That's a
Massive,
massive temp difference.
massive. It was a mild,
Last year, so
it-
mild summer.
Yeah.
To your point, temp controls
it
everything.
controls everything.
1% increase is because we're 10% lower load.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
yeah,
not
so
arguing.
you really have a,
I'm not arguing. You're right.
but
So
the other thing, you know, costs are passed through as well.
Yeah.
All costs, energy costs are passed through.
no
So
more.
it's just really the if everybody pays higher because energy costs higher, everybody pays higher. You can't. Oh, yeah.
I appreciate the answer. Understanding
Yeah.
there's no point in having reserve funds that you never touch.
Yeah.
And if you let those reserve funds that you really never want to touch get too high, then that's gonna.
Yeah.
Hurt the rest of the strategy.
Well, and we'll talk. Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah. Good. Excellent.
Did you have something you were gonna say before?
No, just a couple of questions on the grants and rebates. So the rebates you're getting a per transformer, or is that substation transformer? Maybe I missed.
It's not substations.
Okay,
It's
so
a single phase. It's a primary pole mounted.
so
It's a small
So-
grant.
it's a small grant per, but it's 25K total.
Total.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. I was looking, because if it was per transformer, I thought it was gonna be.
I know,
you're
it-
getting
it-
percentage per
It
transformer.
does read as total, and then I'm like, what must be per, but it's total.
Yeah.
I know.
It's important. So you've got over $48 million of grant submissions, and you know, depending on what happens today and tomorrow, we'll see how fast DOE is. But I think what Ben's trying to drive is that whether it's big or small, we're chasing the dollars, right? Because that's
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I won't say free money, but you know, we have to work for it and we have to apply for it. People don't just say, "Hey, here's a check," right? So the team's working hard on it. That's not a big one, but it's still it's almost in hand,
That's an intern.
right?
All right,
Yeah,
we're gonna
exactly.
move on to how exciting NEPA was, but I do have a tiny question.
Okay.
You said you have someone running the payroll department, but are there checks and balances on that
Yes,
person?
yes.
Okay. It sounded like
person
there's
who
this one person
processes
that's handling all of it and he's great and we don't have to do a thing.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no,
Okay,
there's a lot of checks and balances.
all right. How exciting was
You're gonna learn
NEPA?
about this.
I think I'm on the list.
Oh,
You guys are part of it.
and that was not Pam who said hello to you at NEPA.
oh, good. I literally, and then gone.
I promise if I see you at a conference, I will stop. And
Well, I was,
I'll just wave across the
I
room.
was on the, I got called. It was part of a recruiting call, and anyways, I thank you for clarifying
Everyone
that.
just wants to wave to you.
next year.
Okay, so we jump to NEPA. So this NEPA was a pretty good session, actually. Not that they all are, but they all have different flavors to it. But a lot of time and effort goes into creating these NEPA conferences, and they tend to be very relevant. There were 7 presentations total. I just took 4 critical ones. Again, Gordon Van Wheely, he is the CEO of ISO New England. He is a very important, influential, not just speaker, but what he decides to do. And so his presentation was, I think, 20 slides. I like as you do, try what are some key things that came out of it. So I'll 5 minutes to hit all 3 of these. The message is pretty clear. What Gordon was basically talking about, legislation is driving a lot of this change in the energy world, not, both within the state, but also on a national scale. All right. And they have responsibility for all of New England and all of New England states. There, as a result of this, the energy mix is changing, right? It's changing from, primarily natural gas. If you take that slide, he had a whole bunch of slides. He's a data guy too. A couple of key things he talked about, right? One is non-carbon is growing, no big surprise there. He did comment that PV generation, in terms of, he had a slide that talked about all the different generation pieces coming in. Solar PV is well funded. There's been cancellations of projects. There's some price increases. There's some delays, but not like wind and transmission, right? The wind projects they're a bit of a mess, is what he was talking about, particularly the offshore stuff, because costs are much more expensive than planned, and then getting that transmission piece. As you go to more renewable, as you go to more non-carbon, it's by definition more distributed. By definition, then you have to have more transmission to get them to the load centers. So there's a massive need for additional transmission systems. That is also not well funded. It's in the early. That's a whole nother game of challenges that face the regional network. He talked about natural gas resources. They will remain a critical fuel source. Right now, they are 50% of load. The utilization is somewhere between 50 and 60%. They will be phased out, but many of them will be closed, but they won't completely disappear. And the reason why they won't completely disappear is there will be times and periods where it is the 4th day of a gloomy, cold, no wind period, right? And if you go to upstate New York, which are not uncommon, right? They aren't as common here in New England, but they do come, and they will come at some point in time. As Bob mentioned, last winter was very mild, and this summer was very mild. Our peak this year was in September. September 6th was the capacity peak. It wasn't abnormally high for September. It just, there was no July peak. There was no August peak, right? So the September one became the peak for the year. Kind of unusual. He also mentioned that he calls it adequacy. We call it reliability, but energy adequacy, it's a critical issue between 2027 and 2032. So he's being very careful in terms of his words. He's not saying the sky is falling. He's just, saying, hey, all of us that participate in the market need to be aware that it's becoming more challenging. So, key implications for us, right? We're working on the reliability issue, right? The energy storage is a small piece of it. And then, the longer term, within territory generation. Again, we're consistent with what he's been telling us. Distribution network, he talked about winter peaking. Again, no big surprise. The stuff that we have on there, we have real data in terms of what it means to us. But the key events and the key trends they're not novel observations that, oh, look what we found. All of the energy, in New England, it is a common issue that we're going to be coming winter peaking. And then there's a dynamic nature of the loads. They're going to change, particularly in terms of how people charge vehicles. And then last thing he mentioned, right, EVs and to a lesser extent air source heat pumps. Those are the main load drivers going forward in time. So, his comments are pretty consistent with what we've been talking about. Again, this isn't something new. He's been talking about this for a while as well. But those are some key pieces that came out of Gordon's comments. We have the presentations. We have a whole presentation set. So if you guys, we could send those to you as well. The other one was Mike Zinker. He is NextEra. So he we do a fair amount of business with him, so we get a lot of one-on-one discussions with them, but he did a major presentation. He focuses a lot on natural gas. You know, and Karen, back to your point, he's the one that's really been driving the linkage that existed for the past 2 years between Europe and us. And that linkage never existed until LNG, the ability to move, you know, energy doesn't transport very well except for oil, right? And since we're mainly natural gas, you know, it would come on the 2 pipelines and it would end here. And we do some roughly about a half a dozen LNG shipments in the wintertime. But what happened with the war and the pipeline, et cetera, there was a massive transition because they were willing to spend more, and the LNG tankers started going to Europe. So that was part of the reason why we had a big spike last year. At the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of neat pieces that he talked about, but right now there is a, you know, we are disconnected currently because both in Europe, our weather in New England ends up in Europe 24 to 36 hours later because of the way the Gulf Stream and the wind patterns go. So we had a mild winter, Europe had a mild winter, and that was actually beneficial to everybody because they weren't quite ready for a cold winter last year, which is why, you know, the energy prices came down more than expected. A couple of pieces. The key thing and the key message he had is the volatility of pricing. Remember I told you, and he would tell us, he shared as well, 2010 to 2020, things are pretty stable. You know, small adjustments, you know, $30 to $50 a megawatt hour, but, you know, nice, smooth, easy things. Those days are over. So there's an increased volatility, and it's driven by the exports of natural gas. He has a half a dozen, that's probably always stated. He's got 3 or 4 slides that talk about the build out of LNG shipping terminals and the LNG tankers that will take energy to either Asia or to Europe. We don't do a lot of, you know, we have a natural gas constraint, and going, if you link Zenker's comments with Gordon's comments, you know, there's a continuing increase of natural gas demand in New England until 2032, and then it starts to fall off. And then we end up in at some point in the mid 2030s, we'll end up with an excess of natural gas. So natural gas is it's going to be very volatile, but it's going to get cheap again. But the legislation is going to drive us toward, you know, non-carbon renewable sources. I mean, it's a fascinating puzzle.
It's a model. It's
What?
a model.
It's a model.
It's a model. That's the modeling. It's not reality. You know what I mean?
Well, no,
Yeah, you're right.
Oh yeah. Well, the question, you know, what's going to really happen? But I think, you know, we're on the same page, which is it's all driven by the legislative agenda, right? It's, you know, what are those targets going to be? Because that's going to influence how all this plays. There's a bunch of things happening, you know, in Europe. The UK is, anyways. So Zenker's comments are basically volatility. So what does that mean to us? We've already made a transition because we've been working with them for a while. We've already made a transition. We used to be 70% hedged. You know, if you remember back 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we went to, you know, 80 to 85% hedged. We've made an intent to try and get to 90% hedged. And when I say hedged, long-term contracts. But because our volume came down, we naturally went up to 90, 95%. Because it was a mild winter. So our contracts filled in and we didn't have to buy as much on the wholesale market. No big surprise. The other 2, I'll just do one more. So Millstone Nuclear. So there's 2 nuclear facilities in New England. Millstone is in Connecticut. Seabrook is in New Hampshire. We have contracts with both of them. Our nuclear portfolio, we made a decision, you know, 2 years ago to put it roughly at about a third. You know, we can go up to 40%, which is good. We're roughly in the high 20s right now. We're trying to work out a program where we can do additional purchases from Millstone. And the reason is just to make sure that we balance risk, right? Because there's one reactor in Seabrook, there's 2 reactors in Dominion runs the Millstone facility. All said and done, you know, the same strategy that we're on to try and they're focused on taking care of their primary customer, which is Connecticut. They look at small MLPs like us as being interesting noise, and to catch them on the right day, we can get some additional contracts. The contracts we have in place right now were done, you know, back in the 80s. So we actually have long, you know, I won't say perpetual until end of life type pieces. So anyways, bottom line from his perspective, that facility is going to be around as long as, you know, it is important from a base load perspective. It's going to be around, you know, they run a really good shop there. They aren't very customer responsive, but from a safety reliability perspective, pretty bulletproof. We want to try and get more of that.
Are any nuclear, those mini plants being built in New England? I know it's in 15 years on one of the.
Yeah, so that's it. So both of them talked about, there are a couple of people talked about small nuclear reactor, small modular reactors, as they call them. There's pilots that are being done in Idaho and Utah right now. They are not economical at the current volumes. There's Commonwealth that's in that's building, trying to do some work in Devons, but these are all. The earliest adoption is going to be 15 years down the road, and that's just to get the technology to work. The reality is, where are you going to put these? And now it gets into the question of, nuclear has a very good track record in the United States, but there's still concern about how close to nuclear do people want to get.
I thought it would be on the same sites as the big ones are, because they'll become end of life
That is a
structures.
very
and then they
logical
would just
perspective.
build the new technology.
Yeah, it would make sense for a whole bunch of good reasons. But that political discussion is yet to be had. For us, in reality, as we look at it from a portfolio perspective, it's small nuclear reactors not in our portfolio. I mean, if it becomes 15 years, if we can do it, great. But there's only 2 nuclear sites. There's 3 reactors. That's how we think about it. It's fascinating technology, but it's not highly likely to be dominant in the current climate. But anything can change. So I'm trying to be as non-biased as I can. I don't know if you have any additional comments on it, but
No,
SMR is it's cool stuff, but
heard there's some planned in like in Canada, Ontario area,
yeah, they're trying to do some stuff up there
Yeah.
too.
but that's as far as I know.
Yeah,
There's
the,
a couple
the,
of- yeah,
the US,
that would-
there's real money chasing down. I mean, there's a lot of money behind it. I mean, private money, not government money, private money. Because anyways, for all interesting reasons, but it's down the road. SMR, small
Alright.
modular reactors.
Small
Cool stuff.
modular reactors.
And we're not going to be the Jetsons. It's not going to be in our lifetime.
Okay.
A little nuclear reactor in our little go-kart. Look at you, George. It's fine.
Make the noise.
Okay, back to you.
So, well, the general manager's report,
Oh, right.
so you can just continue.
I'll be fast. So a couple of internal pieces. Station 6. So Station 6 we talked about before. We received back. So one of the things we need, one of the key milestones is an ISO New England managed system impact study. So we got the system impact study back about 3 weeks ago. There are no adverse. So the addition of our connection has no adverse impacts to the transmission system. So we have a few more steps down the road, but we'll be able to check that box here at the end of November, which is good. It's not a surprise that it's not adverse. The issue is there is such a deep queue of system impact studies that are done at that scale. It is 1 to 2 years of backlog. So the fact that we're done is great, right? So that's a key piece on that one. The second piece is, we've been working work schedules. We were doing some creative work with the line crews in terms of kind of a flexible 4x10. Starting in mid-October through before Christmas, we're going to just do a solid 410, and then because we use subcontractors, we have an obligation to offer overtime. We're going to offer overtime on the Fridays. One of the things that we're being very careful about and thinking about, and we're getting good advice to do this, is to make sure that we are prepared for storms. So anyways, we're trying to manage our LMS from a 4x10. So we're going to try that. There are a lot of other utilities that do that, but nothing's perfect. Everything has trade-offs. So that's percolating. We're going to do another employee survey, either end of October. We might come back to you because we have one of our policies is an anonymous communication policy, and the anonymous survey that we want to do with the employees is not consistent with our policies. So we might make we might bring that one to you guys next one, and then do the anonymous employee survey thereafter so that we are internal.
Wasn't the first one you did not anonymous?
It was not, it was signed,
Right.
but it was very limited and I was the only audience behind it. And it came out, we talked, we had an all hands meeting today. So that's the way we did that one, but you know, we're gonna try to do an anonymous one. We'll see.
Yeah.
The other one worked pretty well, but people want to try it, so I'm open to try. And then the last piece in terms of communication, you know, we're doing better and better of our webcast, our quarterly webinars, and our newsletters are getting more read. They're very well read already. But the next thing that we just started is a podcast. Now we kind of came across it because we were doing some other stuff at WCTV, and they said we mentioned a podcast. What's involved? So we've recorded our first 2 sessions. They're live now. They're good. But we're gonna do in 2 weeks another 2, and we're gonna ask the commissioners to participate.
What kind
I
of
nominate
language, what
Bob
kind of
go
language can we
first.
use on a podcast?
Same stuff is always clean. But the point being is, the intention is to do it's a half-hour podcast every 2 weeks. It's another mechanism to get our message out as a discussion. You know, the first 2 are actually pretty good, but we're gonna, you know, it's practice makes perfect. So that's another communication piece that Julie's got us driving through as well. So those are some just quick high level, you know.
And we can find the existing podcasts on YouTube.
Yep.
Under our
I think you so
So,
yeah, we know they will be under ICTV as well. I don't think they made the transition yet because they were linked to the newsletter that went out yesterday. So you should have gotten the newsletter, the RMLD newsletter, and then there's a link right in there so you can see them.
okay.
So the first one was with Bill talking about power supply, and the second one was with Kevin about data analytics stuff. And they're, you know, we'll get better. They're okay. So I haven't seen it again, but
You have to do it with Eric.
that's the GM update. Any questions?
Thanks. Any questions, comments for Greg on that? Then we'll move on to scheduling. I know, well, I'm gonna jump to the CAB meeting because I know I'm covering Thursday, October 5th with you, George.
I'm sorry. The reason is the 5th. Next week is Public Power Week. So Thursday is our Public Power Day. So we're gonna do it. I don't know how we ended up overlapping. It's not an overlap. It'll be done, but during the day, we'll have the back off behind the operations building open. Hopefully the weather will be good. It was very well attended.
It was
last year.
great. Attend if you can. It's
Yeah,
fun.
and we're trying to do public,
for
make it
kids.
public, but yeah. So I'm sorry, forgive me. Yeah.
That's right. I'll dig out my RMLD shirt. But that doesn't affect the 5:30
No,
meeting. for
It
the
was all
CAB,
done
right?
by
Okay,
5:30. It just-
all right. Thought I
I
did for
forgot
a
to mention
second.
that in my GM thing.
So who do we have covering for the October 19th budget meeting for the CAB? There's no name on this.
Actually, the October 5th, yeah, February to September, so in October would be Bill. So Bill's doing the 19th.
Then who's November and December?
Then Dave, November, and
Okay.
And I had a question on December. Both meetings say 7:30 on the same day,
one should be 5, the CAB should be 5.
5:30. Okay.
Good catch. And then going to the paragraph above, the board meetings. Do these dates work for you guys? October 25th, 6:30. That'll be a long one. Mid-November, also a Wednesday at 7:30. And December 13th, Wednesday at 7:30.
Could we roll to 6:30?
Both of them?
Yeah, I don't mind earlier.
I don't normally, this was tough, but
If it's too hot, I mean, 7.
no, let's do it because
The issue with 6:30 is the fact that we have the CAB go first, and they like to have.
Oh, right. We have
you
both
remind
days.
us of that every time.
How
And,
about,
yeah.
how about 7?
Go aim for 7. Think that might,
Yeah, let's try it. You know, I know the cab's crisp.
In the past, we've done the combined budget meeting, so it doesn't, kill people, right? You got the October 19th and October 25th. In the past, we put the budget meeting with the CAB, right, together with us.
We do rates together. We don't typically.
thought
do
we did.
budget.
yeah, no, last year they were definitely separate.
They were separate.
Because
Did it once,
We
that
do.
I recall.
Yeah, we
I
can
mean,
try.
Last year I went to Linfield for it.
Right.
Yeah.
We were last year. Yeah, you were.
Remember it clearly.
Yes, you did. So it's been.
Sit through
It's
that
the first week.
My first day.
Yes, it was.
I just didn't know if that would be an option.
Is that an option?
Let me
But
check.
once,
And and the only reason is that, so I think the cab has, the way of the 20-year agreement is the cab has a period to review it ahead of
Yep.
of the BOC. So that's why
So we wouldn't vote in that meeting then. They would vote.
you wouldn't vote.
They
that meeting.
voted, if they voted to accept it before us, if they choose not to, then we couldn't vote. But if they
Right.
did accept it,
You could,
then we could accept it on the same night. If they choose, then we just
Okay,
vote the
then we
next night.
bump till our,
let's try that.
let's give it a whirl.
Okay, we'll check.
Once you
Let's
vote,
try-
you vote.
Yeah,
You
I
can't
can-
rescind
yeah.
the vote.
They have a period ahead of time. They have up to 30 days, which, so I'm gonna suggest that we actually try and make it, we have to check with the cab. But if we do it all on the 25th, so that gives them the 30 days,
Not fair. No, then.
and we try and do it all one meeting. And
And
then it's,
so try to combine the 19th onto the 25th.
and make
instead
it
of a
one, make
separate
it all
meeting.
together.
So Erica will
Let us know
see.
in the next couple of days.
Right. But
Great-
that, and that would
great
have to
suggestion.
start at 6:30.
That's fine, yeah. I like that.
If needed, could you do the combined on the 19th?
Yeah, we could.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess. I know I'm
Which-
kind of busy on the 8th, but anyway.
October 19th?
Yeah, as a plan B. Plan A is Wednesday, October 25th at 6:30 with the cab for the budget presentation.
Yep.
And the backup is we do it a week earlier, really,
Yep.
on the 19th.
I prefer the Wednesday, 25th personally, but
Yeah.
I'm
The
flexible.
25th. Yep,
Well,
that's our
Wednesday,
first choice.
Yeah,
Yep.
that'd be good. Yeah, understand. Okay, yeah, plan A, plan B.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll let you know next month.
Well, we're all in for the 25th,
Yeah.
so, okay.
It's a fine backup.
So 25th is our first choice. And moving on, there's a meeting that we can attend as commissioners in Littleton, right?
Yeah. I went to the one week before last. I was not available to do it on the May one. I was kind of lukewarm on them, but I think it's better. So I think it's what, I'm gonna try and go to the next one.
But as commissioners, it's
And I think it's
probably
good for,
more.
yeah, I think it's good for
I
you guys
went
too.
once well over a year ago, so.
Yeah, I think that's okay. But all my comment is, I was gonna say, don't bother, but I've changed,
Okay.
so. it's
Are
worth-
those all day with
Nope,
time
no, it's
an hour.
morning.
in the morning?
10:30.
Okay.
in Littleton for an hour, a lot of people in a big room.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have the warrant schedule. You guys can look at that. So he's gonna do that. And now we're gonna move into executive session, so
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead,
Get
read it.
ready.
Move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners go into executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Law C 164, Section 47D, exemption from public records and open meeting requirements in certain instances to cover the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property relative to Maple Meadow and Route 125 in Wilmington. If the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, to approve executive session meeting minutes and return to regular session for the sole purpose of adjournment. No roll call vote required.
Thank you. Okay, do we have a second? Bob, thank you. All those in favor of adjourning? Marlena,
You
Vita,
have to
aye.
do a roll call vote.
Okay, Marlena, Vita, aye.
Deskalakis, aye.
Up with the right.
Adjourned.
Sorry, not moving into executive.
Moving into executive session.
We did
Thank you.
after the executive.
You're correct.
We're gonna try and,